Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Here we have AlphaZero playing white and Stockfish 8 playing black. So AlphaZero began with knight to f3, we have knight to f6 by Stockfish, c4, c5, some kind of symmetrical English, knight c3, knight c6, g3 and now e5 by Stockfish. Gaining space in the center, controlling some dark squares, but also leaving this square on d5 weak. Now this is a hole now, and if you look at it, both the pawns have advanced to c5 and e5, so this square on d5 can never again be defended by a black pawn. Keep this in mind for later. Bishop to g2, bishop to e7, d3, d6, castles, h6. And now if we just do a little bit of general planning, well, if we want to improve white's pieces a bit here, aside from the obvious need to develop this bishop on c1 at some point, in general this knight on f3, it doesn't look actually too great on this square. It's just attacking d4 and e5, but these two squares are both quite heavily defended by black. It also blocks this bishop on g2, so therefore here AlphaZero played knight to e1, opening up the bishop up this nice long diagonal, and also preparing to get the knight to a better square via c2 and e3. And on e3 it would eye this weak d5 square which I was talking about before. So we have bishop to e6 and now f4 by AlphaZero, attacking the center, attacking this e5 pawn. E takes f4, g takes f4. So AlphaZero takes back towards the center, controls the e5 square, which is useful. The drawback is that this sort of opens up white's king a bit, in particular if black can play g5 in the future and try and open up the g file here. Maybe the pawn on f4 should be back on g3, you could argue, but AlphaZero obviously thought it was worth it for the added central control. Queen d7, e4, controlling this square on d5 even more. It does leave a hole on d4, but now that black doesn't have a pawn on e5, maybe this isn't so bad anymore. Black did have a pawn on e5, then yeah, this square on d4 would be great for a knight. But now if black plays knight to d4, you can just challenge this knight with, say, knight to c2, and white should be fine. So bishop to g4 was played, queen to d2, castles long. And now if we look for pawn breaks for white, well, maybe e5 in the center, maybe. But now that this king has castled long, another pawn break really springs to mind now. And that's the b4 pawn break to try and open up the b file for rooks to attack the king. And for this reason, AlphaZero prepared this with rook to b1. Bishop to h3, king to h1, and now black says, well, I need to get going on the g file. My own pawn break for this is g5, so let's prepare that with rook on h to g8. AlphaZero plays a3, again looking to play b4. We have bishop captures bishop, knight takes bishop, and now g5. But here, AlphaZero just closes it up with f5. And this pawn on g5 is actually maybe a bit annoying for black. Black would love to have this g file opened, but if they cannot open the g file, they're really not going to get much attack and play on the king here. g4 is played, queen to d1, attacking h6 with the bishop. g3, really desperately trying to open the g file, but AlphaZero just plays h3. And all of a sudden here, black's not really got anything. These pawns are just blocking out all of black's forces from getting at white's king. White's king is completely safe. But black's king, on the other hand, after something like b4 in the future, this bishop is great on f4 by the way. Black's king does not look like it's got such a good future. King to b8 was played, now knight to e3 by AlphaZero, another useful move. And please take note of the fact that white is controlling this d5 square heavily here, really exploiting the fact that black left it weak. h4, king to g2, and this is sort of the triumph of AlphaZero's strategy here. These pawns on h4 and g4 are just traitors. They block the black rooks from getting down that open file, and white's king is completely safe behind them. And it didn't really seem like Stockfish knew what to do. Put its rook back on h8. I suppose h4 maybe needed to be defended. AlphaZero occupied the brilliant d5 square with a knight. That is an absolutely excellent knight. Knight to h5, bishop e3, and now bishop to f6 by Stockfish. And here, sort of an odd situation, because it does seem like white can just win an exchange here with knight takes f6. Because after knight takes f6, we have bishop to g5 attacking this knight, and the knight's pinned to the rook. If queen e7, knight d5 just wins. So therefore after bishop g5, the knight would have to move somewhere, and let's say after knight h5, you could just win an exchange here. And AlphaZero could have gone for something like this, but it didn't want to. I have to say, after something like b4 next, it does look good for white, but you could argue that the knights here for black have got some potential to get into some good squares. Maybe f4 as well, if you can defend that somehow. And obviously, this just didn't feel right to AlphaZero. It didn't really want to win an exchange like that and give up its dark squared bishop, which controls some important dark squares, I suppose. So therefore, after bishop to f6, not knight takes bishop, but actually knight to b5, hitting this weakness on d6. And when I first saw this, I thought, well, why not maybe a6, just kick this knight away, right? But here we have a really engine line, knight bc7. This is a really good square for the knight, actually. And if black doesn't try and challenge this knight's placement, white's just going to leave it there and play queen b3 next with a really big attack. So I thought here, well, rook to c8, the knight's trapped, right? Black's going to take and win 2 pieces for the rook. But here's the engine move, knight to a8. And this knight's going to come back to b6, and if black takes it, well, knight to b6 would win the queen. So for that reason, after knight to b5, black can't really play a6. Black tried bishop d4 instead. But the knight just took this bishop. That bishop was really controlling some dark squares, so it's not good that black's lost it. Knight takes d4. Finally, we get this pawn break in with b4, but it is a strong pawn break. f6, a4. White just gains some space here. Rook h7. Stockfish doesn't seem to know what to do. a5, queen c6, queen d2, rook e8, b5, queen d7. And this knight on d4 is actually stranded now, so AlphaZero just puts its queen on c7. And after rook to d8, Stockfish just playing moves that are useless really. Takes the knight and wins a pawn. And please take a moment to compare these two placements of the knights here. This knight on d5 is an absolute monster, and it's using that weakened square that Stockfish weakened right back in the opening. And now it's haunting Stockfish. Compare this knight to this knight on h5, which is really not doing a whole lot right here. And also look at these weaknesses, d6 and f6, maybe a7. White is winning here. White's also up material. So queen e8, rook on b to e1, queen e5, queen e3, queen b2 check, rook e2, queen a3, queen d4 hitting that weakness, rook c8, rook c2, queen c5. AlphaZero didn't want a queen trade. Queen c3, rook c h8, d4, queen c8, queen f3, and here, oops, sorry about that. Stockfish must have thought the knight on d5 is just too strong here. Something like, it looks like c5 is coming for white with a devastating attack. So Stockfish actually played rook to c7 here, just letting the knight take the rook. It just hated that knight on that weak square so much. But of course white's still winning anyway. a6, queen b6, rook to d1, queen c7, rook e1, knight g7, and now after a takes b7, Stockfish resigned. White's position is just overwhelming. So yeah, the reason I really like this game is the fact that AlphaZero just continued to use that weak d5 square that Stockfish weakened in the opening. And long term, it was always there for white, it was always an asset. And it really, that knight on d5 was the reason that AlphaZero won the game. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this game, and thank you very much for watching. See you next time.